Let's talk all about AI in business. It's hosted by Brent Muller. Welcome to the Future Proof Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of Future Proof, the podcast where we're decoding how founders, leaders, and execs are reshaping the business landscape using AI, data, and automation. And if you're looking to future-proof your business, you're definitely in the right place. And before we jump in, as we always do, if anybody needs help understanding where to start with AI and you want to just have a quick 15-minute conversation with, there's links in the show notes with all of our episodes. So just book 15 minutes with us. It's not a sales call. We're just trying to help guide all of our founders and CEOs and execs on the best path forward. But let's jump into today's episode. I am joined today by John Linkous from Phalanx Security. John, thank you for spending some time with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Great to be here. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So, John, as we always do, let's start with what I call the leader's journey. Talk to us about, kind of your career background leading up to founding Phalanx.
Yeah, absolutely. Going way back, I would say I was born with the geek gene, right? So I always built that. When I was a little kid, built computers with my dad, who was an electrical engineer, and my grandfather, and kind of really got into tech as a hobby when I was younger. And then after graduation from my undergrad, I ended up getting very lucky and getting a job in network administration at NASA. I was there for a couple of years.
Wow, that's a great first job.
Yeah, it's not bad. So I was there for a couple of years, won their Individual Contractor of the Year award at Goddard Space Flight Center. And then, worked in a variety of roles. I was a technology director at a large public relations firm in DC. Then later on, when I started my consulting journey, which was about 25, 27 years ago, I'm dating myself horribly there, but started working for some pretty significant organizations, did a bunch of work at Vanguard, the mutual fund company. I was at New York Stock Exchange for several years in Manhattan. And so, wow. I would say roughly the last 20 years have really been strictly just in the cybersecurity space. So I sort of started out in systems administration, IT, light programming type stuff, and then I graduated over to cybersecurity just because I thought it was a lot more fun and a lot more cool. And it's been a good path so far. And sort of the areas where I specialize in personally, identity governance, identity access management, and cloud security are probably the areas where I personally spend most of my time today. And then, of course, my team has a lot of other areas of expertise and specialization, offensive security, et cetera, that we deliver for our clients.
Amazing. So tell us a little bit about Phalanx and kind of your impetus for founding and kind of your vision going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I previously founded two other consulting companies. A long time ago, the first one went up epically in flames, which sometimes happens. The second one,
a lot of us have those stories.
Yeah. The second one I built up and sold, which is pretty neat, getting my first company exit. But I wound up working for the company that acquired us for a little while. But just had that entrepreneur gene in me, I guess, and wanted to start another firm. Founded Phalanx Security in 2020, right at the height of the pandemic. That's a great time to start a business, right?
Yeah. Couldn't have timed it better.
Exactly. But we're 100% services. So we're not a reseller of any kind. We're not a VARSI. We're not even an MSSP.
So you're agnostic to everything.
Exactly. Yeah. Vendors, technology, et cetera. So, we're, all our services kind of run the gamut from cybersecurity governance, things like enterprise risk assessments, policy standards development, strategy, how do you move workloads securely into the cloud, things like that. We have a very large threat practice, which covers everything from offensive security, pen testing, APIs, IoT devices, medical industry equipment testing, to defensive, which is threat hunting, helping organizations to build SOCs, things like that. And then finally, incident response. There's no such thing as perfect security. Someday something bad is going to happen. It's probably going to happen more than once. And so making sure your organization is prepped to handle that properly. So that's kind of what we do. In terms of our who we target, we're about 90% commercial. We don't do any federal business of any kind. So for us, it's financial services and fintech companies, healthcare, both payer and provider, energy, transportation and logistics. And then we're about 10% SLED, state, local, and educational organizations. And if I had to sort of say in one bullet point what we do or what we try to do, our vision is it's really to deliver world-class cybersecurity services and do it at a reasonable price point, right? So it's that broad set of services, that vendor neutrality, and the most important ingredient is our people. We're just absolutely fantastic. I mean, yeah, I sort of run things, but the big brains are my staff, and they're fantastic at what they do.
As always, it is, right?
Yeah.
Every successful company is about the people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, so a couple questions, John. So as you look forward, before we jump into the emerging tech, talk to me about what you've seen over the last few years and what you see on the horizon, the change in the landscape, right? Whether it's the identity management, the ransomware, I mean, the attacks. I mean, there's so much to cybersecurity, but just kind of tell me broadly, like what you're seeing and where the opportunities and risks are.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think one thing, and this has been going on for over a decade now, is that migration to cloud, right? Everybody wants to move workloads to cloud. There's a lot of great things you get out of it. You get efficiency, you get consistency. The problem is when you move to the cloud and you try to treat the cloud like it's a data center, and it isn't like a data center. There are huge differences,
at all, right?
There are huge differences, not only when it comes to, compute facilities, right? Because with cloud, you got things like, containerization, you've got serverless workloads, you've got all these things that are there to kind of optimize and scale out your business workflows. But if you don't have the appropriate access control and you're doing, you're moving from physical to software defined networking and you don't know what you're doing, all it takes is one mistake in a JSON file or an XML file and boom, you have complete misconfiguration of access control or even resources on your network. It's funny, it's a variety of tools to kind of scan out as part of our offensive security services. And there are a couple of products out there that will basically scan the entire internet and look for certain things like open storage containers, for example, on AWS and stuff like that. And the amount of misconfiguration and publicly exposed stuff that's out there is frightening. And organizations, really, if they're going to, as they continue to move to the cloud, they need to be much more secure in terms of the way that they're doing things. I'd say the other one, and of course, I'm sure, as I know you talk about this all the time as well, right, is AI, right? So, AI can be incredibly useful in cybersecurity. We use it as well. And, I'm happy to get into some of the specifics of how we successfully do that. But in the hands of the bad guys, it's a tremendously valuable tool. I mean, we just see the level of deepfakes, the quality of phishing emails, the complete offensive toolkit has totally changed with AI. The bad guys know that it's a great tool. They have no qualms about using it. And in many ways, it's getting harder and harder, particularly for rank and file employees, to discern whether something is a legitimate email or whether it's, an attempt to try and get them to, click on a link that they shouldn't or cough up sensitive information. So AI is that, two sides of the coin battle that we're dealing with a lot today.
Right. And so that's a great segue, John, into kind of where you see emerging tech between data, AI. I mean, there's again, automation probably a little bit less, but definitely data and AI in cybersecurity is such a, and as you hit it perfectly, there's an offensive and a defensive strategy, right? So how do you see emerging tech? Kind of walk us through some of the things that you guys do with it, and then we'll talk about kind of the industry in general.
Yeah, sure. So, for us, one of the things I mentioned, we do a tremendous amount of offensive security, right? So we do penetration tests, vulnerability scans, source code and static code analysis, IoT device assessments, APIs, et cetera. And what we've done is, as we do those, we take all that data, we anonymize it, and we sanitize it. We strip out anything that could tie it to a specific customer, IP addresses or host names or anything like that. We drop it into a ring-fenced LLM or RAI LLM that is our tenant. And we use a combination of tools. We use custom model training, and then we use retrieval augmented generational RAG to kind of help us improve our clients' cybersecurity posture by focusing them on what the most critical stuff is that they need to tackle inside of their environments, right? So, we're using all this data that we capture as a data set, which of course is not exposed to the public. That's entirely within our LLM tenant. But we're using that in order to find these broad-based patterns, right? So, we can now go in. We have enough data accumulated that we can go in and say, okay, well, historically over the last 5 years or 7 years of data collection, what are some of the biggest problems that we see in terms of specific exploitable vulnerabilities within hospitals in general, right? And we can see that It's things like, okay, segmentation is a problem, in a lot of these organizations. It's deprecated technology, right? Operating systems that have failed and for which exploits actually exist, right? And we use that data when we actually do our pen tests, but it's a huge trove of information for us because we can map that stuff back into common tactics, techniques, and procedures, things like the MITRE ATT&CK framework and the Lockheed cyber kill chain in order to really get better insights into, based on certain types of industries and certain types of organizations, what should we be looking at and recommending to them in order to improve their security postures, right? So that's us internally. Now, in the industry in general, I think I think it's an incredibly useful technology if it's done right. I think we see two problems there. One is that every vendor in the world that has a product in cybersecurity slaps AI on the box, right, before they send it.
And not just cyber, across the board. Like we've talked to, do you know what's funny about that, John? Just to kind of piggyback on that for all of our listeners is that every board that we've talked to, that's their number one thing. We have to have AI in our product suite, whether it's just a feature or a bolt-on, just so, right? And it drives me nuts about the hype, right? Because it's not the right way to do it. But please continue, because I think it's not just cyber, it's everywhere.
Yeah, it is. And, there are don't get me wrong, there are legitimate implementations of AI in cybersecurity technology and outside of that in IT as well. I mean, I see, for example, some of the firewall vendors who do a really good job of basically doing global acquisition of anonymized data and then being able to use AI to help improve their IDS IPS patterns, for example, globally. That kind of stuff makes sense. But, when you've got somebody who's, a lot of vendors who just slap it on there. And the problem is, if you're using that as a buy decision and you don't understand how that AI is being used, first off, is it even really AI, or is it just sort of, borderline machine learning, right? Or just
pattern recognition, or
something like that. And this isn't even AI in the first place, but even scarier than the idea of fake marketing around the term AI is what happens if that they actually do have AI, but they're not using it in the right way. What happens if all of a sudden your data from using this technology is going back into their data lake out on the web because they're a SaaS provider, for example, and then all of a sudden that's getting mined publicly, and you've got public data about potential vulnerabilities and exploits that affect your environment that go out there. So it's more than a double-edged sword. It's this possibility that first off, they're just using the term AI to make a marketing claim that isn't there, and then the scarier part is, okay, maybe it is AI, but do they have a properly ring-fenced? Are the controls there?
Exactly. And I think that's one of the fears that we hear, John, so much from, hesitant, or I don't want to say reluctant, because I don't think anybody's totally reluctant to adopt AI, but I've talked to a number of leaders on the podcast where the hesitancy is exactly what you said. How do I know that my data is not going into some commercially bought data lake because we picked the wrong vendor, or we didn't read the T's and C's.
Yep.
And, we're just using OpenAI's, APIs, and we're basically just handing our data out, right? And so how do you answer that for your clients?
Yeah. So for us, one of the services that we offer, and it's a new discrete service that we've been offering for well over a year now, is an AI security assessment, right? So we go in and we look at, first off, what AI related technologies are you using? And again, sometimes it's going to be products that claim to use AI, and we have to do a sort of a deep dive on how that's done. Sometimes it's their own instance of ChatGPT or another LLM, and and
Right.
we're looking at how they're implementing it internally. Sometimes it's, like cloud service providers, Azure, AWS, Google, Oracle. They all provide, APIs in their own LLMs today. And a lot of our clients are using those as they migrate stuff to the cloud because it's easy to just sort of turn it on, right? Hey, it's just another monthly fee as part of our tenant cost. And then, so we go in and we take an approach that's based on standards. Like, for example, NIST, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology has actually a pretty effective AI security standard that they put out that's based loosely on the NIST cybersecurity framework. And being able to use tools like that to go in and analyze the environment and say, hey, okay, if you're using AI, that's great. Let's make sure that it's meeting the business needs that you need it for, but simultaneously, let's make sure you're using it in a secure manner so that your data isn't getting outside of the organization and everything is appropriately fenced in.
Right. No doubt about it. No, it makes a lot of sense. And it's really good advice. I love that AI security assessment. I think there needs to be more quick, assessments, whether it's we do an AI readiness type thing for the same reason, but I think the security thing needs to be a part of that, especially depending on the type of organization. You talked about financial services, you talked about healthcare. When you get HIPAA and you get regulatory compliance, all that stuff has extra layers of compliance and regulations that you have to ensure. So it's better to do something like a security readiness assessment before doing anything. So I love that you guys have started to offer that.
Yeah, we actually have a series of what we call quick strike assessments. So these are great for organizations that just need a quick sanity check, if you will, on security posture. Yeah. Or organizations in certain verticals, particularly small to mid-market sized organizations, so like healthcare clinics or small local or regional banks, things like that, where because of that AI data that I mentioned to you before that we've captured internally, we sort of know based on vertical where some of the weak spots tend to be. So we can go in and actually do an assessment on those in a very short period of time, usually 2 to 3 days, bring in our own tools.
That's fantastic.
Scan the environment, get all the information that they need. Now, is that as complete as something like a SOC 2 assessment? No, and it's not intended to be that, but it's inexpensive, it's fast, and it's accurate data, and it gives those organizations sort of a compass of where they should be looking at for future remediation of security.
I love that. And I think there's a lot of organizations that we've had on the podcast, that listen to the podcast, that would absolutely need to do that quick security assessment and risk assessment, especially around their data and their security. So that's fantastic. I love that you do that. And hopefully we'll put some of those links below when the podcast goes live. John, so talk to me. You remember, think about your other 2 businesses, but prior to this, there used to always be the 5-year plan. And I don't believe that at the rate of change that 5 years makes sense. I tell this to everybody. Maybe 18 months, 2 years max, just because we don't know what's going to be available, how fast things are changing. What do you see for the industry over the next, 18 to 24 months?
Yeah. And you mean security in general or consulting specifically, or?
Both.
So I think in security, the consolidation around vendor technologies in particular, the past 2 years or so has been crazy, right? So you have a couple of really big companies, you've got your sort of Microsoft and Google size companies, which have always made acquisitions, but now you're getting, other companies that haven't even been in cybersecurity before, and they're now buying cybersecurity companies and trying to, use that as a revenue aggregation and increase point, right? My concern there is that within the vendor space is that we may be losing out on some of that R&D innovation, that comes from.
I was just thinking innovation's going to suffer, right?
Innovation is absolutely going to suffer because a lot of organizations are going to be relying on things like AI plugins and stuff like that to maybe do some of the heavy lifting rather than coming up with unique algorithms or methods for doing stuff. So, I see that as a potential concern. Plus, looking at my customers, they hate vendor lock-in. Not everybody, but most of our clients are best of breed. They want the right solution for the right job.
Yeah.
And it's difficult for them when they go through a process of evaluating 15 different vendors, say for EDR, endpoint security, and the top 3 vendors within 6 months after they make their selection get bought up by somebody else, right? So it's there's a lot of insecurity there. There's a lot of concern over the quality of those technologies over time, and that's one thing. I think in the consulting services side, my side of the industry, I think that one of the bigger issues that we see really changing in this side of the industry is the fact that we've really got to start developing those microservices, right? So I mentioned the quick strike assessments, right? Over the past several years, we've developed things that are services that address very specific areas of cybersecurity. Things like ransomware readiness assessments, that are targeted specifically at ransomware. We've created in response to the tragedy with the United Healthcare CEO. We've developed a cybersecurity executive protection program, right, where we help senior executives, for example, to understand the implications of putting information about their lives online and what they can do about it, how they can, have people on their team issue takedown notices for content that they don't want up there on the internet, et cetera. So specialization in consulting has really become important, particularly because a lot of organizations now look at things like pen testing, for example, as a commodity service, right? Because there are companies out there that claim to be, we automate pen testing, right? We're a cloud pen testing provider. Okay, that's fine if you could really do that, but is that really what you're doing, right? Is it an apples to apples comparison with a couple of engineers who spent 20 years in the gray hat field and know how to take out systems in minutes as opposed to running specific Python scripts to see if something is exploitable.
Yeah, totally get it. Totally get it. Interesting. And that I can see definitely being one, the vendor consolidation, right? That's happening in other industries as well. And I do think innovation suffers. I think you're spot on there. The consulting one is definitely going to be the microservices is, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think the specialization is going to be another thing. Like you were talking about pen testing, but I think across different industries, I come from a consulting background, and I think we've had generalists for a long time, and I think specialists will be the future, right? And it's not just, you can't, people are, I'll just become an AI consultant. You're going to have to become a very niche specific consultant, because I think that that's what people are looking to. How do you fill the gaps for specific problems? So
exactly.
And we've heard that from a number of our guests, right, on the podcast. So, John, I think you have a really good read there on that. So I always ask one last question, right? This is our selfish question for all the other founders and CEOs. John, within your business right now, what would be the one thing if you could plug an AI solution in to help you guys, acquire more customers or help customers in a certain way? What would you pick to be that one thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, and I'm gonna say probably less on the delivery side, because I think we're solid there, but more on the business development side. I would love sort of an AI tool that could go out there and scrape, aggregate, and analyze what security leaders, direct managers, directors, executives, people with signing authority are actually looking for online across hundreds or thousands of different sites, aggregating what they're liking on LinkedIn and what they might be posting on X, and being able to provide sort of some AI-driven visibility into what people are thinking, what their mindset is. And it's interesting, and Brendan, I'm sure you see this all the time as well. You can have two different companies that do virtually the same thing, right? To banks, to hospitals, to transportation and logistics companies. And their approach to cybersecurity can be completely different. One company 100%. Takes a very tools focused approach. Let's buy stuff and connect it together, and we'll build a cybersecurity program that way. Others take the other one would take a much more process and procedural driven approach, right? Let's make sure we're starting out with really good policies that then drive our risk management process, and then the tools come way later on down the pike. So being able to get an visibility into that in some way would be incredibly helpful. I think AI will be able to do that at some point. but I don't quite think it's there yet. But that would definitely help, right? Is getting something that gives us some visibility into the thought processes of security leadership, and both in our clients and on our prospective clients.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, across CISOs, your clients, and all the way through the leaders, right? Like yourself in the industry, right? Aggregating that together. Totally
Exactly.
get it. Yep. Very doable. But no, John, thank you. This has been really enlightening. I think honestly, one of the big concerns we get from most of our podcast guests are around the data and intrusion detection. So cybersecurity is a big worry for them. And I think that I love the quick strike assessment that you guys offer. And I think that's fantastic. But John, and we'll have all the links below in the show notes, but tell everybody how to get in touch with Phalanx.
Yeah, thanks, Brent. So you can reach us at any time. We're online at Phalanx, that's Phalanx SEC for security.com. You can reach me personally on J Linkous, J and then Linkous at phalanxsec.com. And of course, we would be happy to hear from any of you at any time, even if you just want to chat or ask a question. Happy to.
Yeah, see, I love that, John, and that we're always in the same look. The business is always going to come. We're about connecting and helping, and you're a great addition to what I call our podcast family of founders and CEOs. So thank you so much for spending time with us, and we'll look forward to staying in touch in the future. And that wraps up this episode of Future Proof, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Brent. Appreciate it.
If you're ready to embrace change and lead with innovation, be sure to subscribe and never miss an episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Future Proof Podcast.